administration, there were really no allegations that they were focusing on purely domestic communications. And the program involving the telecom companies, Verizon and so forth, involves not only domestic communications, but local communications. In other words, if you're calling your next door neighbor. So there was never this far reach in the Bush administration, although that program itself was quite expensive. What happened, though, was that after the Bush administration, warrantless eavesdropping program, it was codenamed Stellar Wind. After that was revealed by the New York Times, the Congress basically just allowed that program to continue under the rubric of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Amendments Act. So it basically codified into law the activities of the Bush warrantless eavesdropping program, and then they've been expanded on by the Obama administration.
We heard Senator Dianne Feinstein and others talk about their knowledge of the program, but also for the fact that since courts are involved in the gathering of this information, that it shouldn't be an alarm to average citizens.
Well, I think that's such a misnomer in terms of describing the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. When it was originally set up, it was a very powerful court that exercised jurisdiction over who was being eavesdropped on. That was back in 1978, and that's how it worked from 1978 until 2001. And then that's when the Bush administration went around, secretly went around the court, and then after that was discovered, what Congress did was basically neuter the court. It took away a lot of its enforcement powers. It basically made it a rubber stamp. It turned the FISA court into a rubber stamp. So by saying that, don't worry, the FISA court's overseeing our operations is really nonsense.
When it comes to the type of data that's gathered, is the term metadata and the way it's described with it's just the when the call was placed, how long, etc., is it as innocuous as it's projected by even Verizon and some who talk about the program?
Well, the metadata is all the externals from the telephone call, except for the conversation. It's where the call was made from, which number is calling, which other number, the frequency of the calling. All that information, if it's just bland information, it won't really mean much. But what the NSA does, what NSA's job basically is to data mine all that information. In other words, take it and turn it into something meaningful. So it's when you start analyzing all that information that you start sort of value adding it, and that's where you start getting into issues of privacy and so forth. People in the U.S. are supposed to have some degree of privacy with their communications. If I call my next-door neighbor, I wouldn't expect that the NSA would have a reason to have a record of that, or how long I spoke, or how often I spoke, or who I called after that. I mean, why are these, it's absurd to me that these agencies have this power to do this type of surveillance.
John Podhoretz in the New York Post has an op-ed on this issue, and some of the arguments he makes is saying, let's get this straight, Verizon has 120 million customers, 120 million. Whatever it is the NSA is searching for, it isn't the use of the phone sex line or your jokes about Barack Obama or your gambling problem or anything about you, dear reader. The thing is, no matter how important you are to yourself, you're exactly that unimportant to the computers at the National Security Agency. How would you respond to that?
Well, I've never known John
Podhoretz?
Yeah, Podhoretz to be an expert on the NSA. I haven't seen his writings on the NSA lately. I think that's just a bad analysis of what the U.S. stands for. The U.S. doesn't stand for massive surveillance. That's what George Orwell wrote about in 1984, where you have a surveillance society and everything is, the government has access to everything. It's absurd to think that that this is a great deterrent to terrorism. I mean, why didn't they prevent the Boston bombing? This is such a great program. How about the underwear bomber, the Times Square bomber? The U.S. Has had a really bad record in terms of preventing these terrorist incidents, and it's one reason is because they have too much information, not too little information. I mean, the bigger you build the haystack, the more difficult it is to find the needle. And all they keep doing is building the haystack bigger and bigger, and instead of hiring people to put more hay on the stack, they should be hiring more analysts to analyze what's in the stack, instead of just acquiring more and more information. I mean, that's what I got from reading this article from the Prism, is that they keep wanting, we've got 9 of the major companies, now we need more. We're trying to get more companies, information from more companies. And, if it's so great, then why did these bombings keep happening? All I've heard is that there may have been some terrorist incident that was prevented that they don't give any details of. Well,
one of the statements from the White House, James Bamford, was that the president was open to a discussion about this type of activity, the gathering of information versus concerns about national security and privacy. Do you think these revelations of stories will open on a dialogue on Capitol Hill about where we are as far as privacy is concerned?
Now, the problem you have on Capitol Hill is that all these Congress people or senators and members of Congress want to play it safe after 9/11. They know that there's no value in siding with civil liberties because when you go up for a re-election, your opponent is going to say, unless you voted for, some heavy-handed legislation involving surveillance or whatever, that you're weak on terrorism. And nobody wants to be accused of being weak on terrorism. So you get very little support in Congress for moderation or for lowering the bar when it comes to all this surveillance. And so I don't expect too much to come out of Congress. I haven't expected anything out of Congress for years, if not decades.
One more question, James Bamford. As far as after the information's taken and what's done with it, there's a picture in one of the papers this morning that shows something called the NSA's Utah Data Center in Bluffdale, Utah. Is that where the information is stored once it's gathered, or are there other places?
No, I actually wrote the cover story on that. On the NSA data storage in Bluffdale, Utah. I wrote the cover story on that program for Wired Magazine last year. It's a 1 million square foot data center, and that will be the central location where all the information that NSA picks up, whether it's by satellite or from this Prism collection or from the call details from the Verizon and so forth, and all the information they pick up surveilling the Middle East, Libya, Afghanistan, and so forth. They all go to this one location, this 1 million square foot data center in Bluffdale, Utah, and that will serve as the NSA's cloud. In other words, from that or to that location, the NSA analysts at headquarters and other places will be able to access all the data that's sitting in there through heavily secured fiber optic cables. So it serves as the central repository for NSA's surveillance capabilities and the point where the analysts dip into and come out of electronically to analyze the information.
James Bamford, national security writer, a longtime writer about these kind of issues, also an author as well, and writes for several publications, joining us to give his perspective. Mr. Bamford, thanks for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Goodbye.
For the remainder of our time, we'll talk to you or hear your thoughts on these programs that have been revealed in the press for the last couple of days. Again, the number's 202-585-3881 for Republicans, 202-585-3880 for Democrats, 202-585-3882 for Independents. Our first call, Tanya, Martinsburg, West Virginia, Independent line. Good morning, Tanya. Go ahead.
Good morning. I find it just amazing. For decades, all I did was vote. But when President Obama came along, he wanted people to get involved with politics. Call your senators, call your Congress people. And then when you don't like what Obama has to say, then you have to worry about who's going to get information. If you call the White House and you say, I don't like the way this is being done, they're going to monitor all your calls. I'm not an internet person, so I don't know about that, but some of the gadgets that they have now, even when you're in your own home, they can come through your home and see what kind of things do you like to buy, your arguments between your spouses and what have you, drones flying over your head, surveying everything you have in your home. So you don't even have to go out. You have no more castle. It's all by the government. And the Democrats who always cried under President Bush, they're the same Democrats that say, well, we throw our hands up. It's always been done this way.
Okay. And that's Tanya from Martinburg, West Virginia. Republican line up next. Lumberton, North Carolina. Rebecca, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to say, just like she said, everything we do, every time we give a phone number to a cashier, every time we use a debit card, every time we turn on our television, because our cable box is digital now, everything we do is being stored somewhere. Everybody knows about the government, but they never think about Walmart or Home Depot or Radio Shack or your television, what channels you watch.
But here we have the NSA collecting this information, so what do you think about that practice?
I think that the moment that we got a Social Security number, everybody started collecting information. This is way, way past time to worry about that.
Sean Dunn off of Facebook says, I am fine with the government's ability to track terrorist organizations and their affiliates. This brings up the interesting moral questions on whether the National Security Act should have the ability to using their intel to bring down human smugglers or major drug suppliers. Lynn Moore says, I think it is so wrong. I think their focus should be on other issues and not on people's personal phone calls. This is why I'm thinking about getting rid of my cell phone off Twitter. Jan Ness says, this phone suite, does it pick and choose, or are the Congress critters, and that's her words, and families included, after all, if you have nothing to hide? And we are from Monty Laban this morning saying the NSA surveillance program tells us one thing, we are all guilty until proven innocent. From Charlottesville, Virginia, this is Linwood, Democrats line. Hi.
Hey, what's going on this morning? I watch Washington Journal every morning. I'm up to my point. I think this is all summed up by a corporate white media. The ratings for an already failed journalistic system where the news is being canceled. This has been a part of the Patriot Act. I don't know why the masses of our American public are so, oh, God, shocked by this. Well,
you heard our first caller, though, our first phoner this morning saying it was expanded under this administration, even from the beginnings under the Patriot Act.
Well, let's look at the fact. Okay, when both political parties was expanded, and what the American public want to sit here and do now, juicy sex stories of our media.
Linwood, I have to apologize. You're breaking up very considerably. If you want to try to call us back and see if we can get you back on once you get a clear signal, I invite you to do that. Please do. You're just breaking up, and try it again. San Diego, California, independent line. Sean, hello.
Good morning. Hi. I just wanted to say that I'm not.
Administration in general showed a higher regard for the law when it conflicts with its policy preferences. San Antonio, Texas, Democrats line.
Hello.
Hi, you're on.
Oh, fine. My name is Jimmy. I've had a top secret SCI clearance for over 40 years. I dealt with cryptology and secure information. There was one thing taught to us, and that was loose lips sink ships. It came out of World War II. Mm-hmm. And you could take unclassified information. If you get enough of it, you can glean classified information from it. And a program they have going now has no classification, has no real secure meaning to it whatsoever. But if a terrorist that they locate that's doing harm to the United States, then they can run it through the computer and see how many people that person has coordinated with. Before then, it has no meaning unless a terrorist threatens the United States. And there's one other point I want to make this morning. That man that you had on Bamford, he's the kind of person that gives terrorists targets to shoot at, telling them where the United States collect and hold data. It only makes that place a target. That is the kind of thing that the news people get into that they don't understand.
So as far as the practices that we've read about and heard about, do you support them, oppose them? What's your thoughts on them?
But then I support them wholeheartedly because they're not listening to your information. They don't care what you do. The only thing is that if a terrorist has a phone and they know he's a terrorist, that gives them the opportunity to contact, to know who all that terrorist talked to.
We got that. You said that before. Maryland up next. Walter, Independent Line. Hi.
Hi, how are you this morning?
Well, thank you.
Well, I wonder what would the alternative to this program be. I don't like the program, but the alternative to doing nothing is it's a balancing act. If we don't do anything, we're going to have more Boston bombings, more World Trade Centers. We absolutely have to do something, even if it's distasteful.
Would you say that what you've heard about so far is balance in your opinion, or is it swayed one way or the other, or how would you react to that?
It's hard to tell. A lot of times you can't really get a handle on it until you see it in the rear view mirror, and that's one of the causes of concern that I have. How is it going to play out in the future?
Joy Mine taking a tongue-in-cheek approach to this whole story, saying, let's give a shout-out to the NSA, who is likely monitoring our tweets. We hear next from Jacksonville, North Carolina. This is on our Republican line. Josh, good morning.
Hi, good morning. It's interesting. I was listening before Washington Journal came on to the Judicial Oversight Committee hearing, or not hearing, but the meeting, and Lindsey Graham was talking about the war on terror, and we are at war, and he kept using the word war and the phrase war on terror. And it's somewhat hypocritical because the definition of war, the way he was using it, was in a political sense and honestly a perpetual sense, instead of a very specific interstate war concept from, say, international relations. That gives the government a lot of liberty to do things in the name of national security. So with the NSA's monitoring of phone calls, making a database of phone calls for the Justice Department or for the administration to look at when it deems necessary, I find it peculiar that Senator Graham is in favor of that, but he's not in favor of a national gun registry that would, in fact, do the same thing as this. And I'm not saying I'm in favor of a national gun registry. I'm just trying to point out the intellectual hypocrisy here in this situation. But it certainly, to the last caller's point, we had the first Boston bombing, and this program was in place, and it didn't help. We had the Fort Hood shooting, and this program was in place, and it didn't help. So I'm confused. What good is this program doing? What purpose does this serve?